Welcome back to ZE Coins. Today, we're stepping back into a time when the world was changing fast, fashion was bold, the Vietnam War was drawing to a close, technology was starting to accelerate, and American coinage continued to evolve in ways most collectors didn't even realize. One of the most interesting pieces of this era is the 1973 Washington quarter. It might look like just another 25-cent piece to someone who's not familiar with numismatics, but for seasoned collectors, it's a coin wrapped in history, subtle design quirks, mint mark mysteries, and surprising value depending on its condition. What makes the 1973 quarter so fascinating is not just its age, but the world it was minted into. The early 70s represented a transitional moment in American economic and cultural life. Inflation was rising, the U.S. Mint was adjusting production numbers, and silver coinage had already been discontinued a few years earlier, forcing collectors who loved the look and feel of silver to pay closer attention to clad coins. These quarters were minted not for rarity, but for utility. Millions upon millions circulated daily in people's pockets, cash registers, gas stations, and grocery stores, but despite their common appearance, not all 1973 quarters are equal. Most people don't realize that small details, like mint marks, condition, strikes, and even errors, can dramatically change the value of a coin. And when it comes to the Washington Quarter series, those details matter more than ever. The Washington Quarter had been in production since 1932, originally intended as a one-year commemorative issue to celebrate George Washington's 200th birthday. But because the design was well received and the U.S. Mint lacked a replacement design plan, the quarter continued to be minted year after year. By 1973, the design had already been in circulation for over 40 years, yet it remained one of the most widely recognized coins around the world. At first glance, a 1973 Washington quarter looks pretty ordinary. But once you begin to study it, you discover a world of detail. On the obverse, the front of the coin, you'll see the classic profile of George Washington, sculpted by John Flanagan. The word Liberty stretches across the top. Beneath Washington's chin is the motto "In God We Trust," and just beside it sits the mint mark. That tiny letter is one of the biggest clues to determining the coin's value. The three mint marks most collectors look for are D for Denver, S for San Francisco, and no mint mark at all, which indicates it was produced in Philadelphia. Although all three mints produced 1973 quarters, only San Francisco issued proof strikes. These proofs were specially minted for collectors and not intended for circulation, meaning they often survive in much better condition than the business strike coins from Philadelphia and Denver. The reverse of the coin is equally iconic. The spread-winged eagle perched atop a bundle of arrows, surrounded by olive branches, symbolizes both strength and peace, two values deeply rooted in American identity. While this design remained unchanged for decades, collectors often study tiny differences in strike quality, metal flow, and clarity to determine whether a 1973 quarter is worth far more than face value. Now, one of the key things that adds value to the 1973 Washington quarter is condition. If you have one that's been bouncing around in circulation for 50 years, chances are it has scratches, wear on Washington's hair, and a loss of detail on the eagle's feathers. These coins usually aren't worth much above face value. But when you find a 1973 quarter in mint state, which means it looks nearly flawless, as if it just left the mint, its value changes dramatically. A coin graded MS-65 or higher by a professional coin grading service can command an impressive premium. Why? Because even though millions were minted, only a small fraction remain in pristine condition. Most coins from that year lived extremely hard lives, rubbing against other coins, falling into vending machines, dropping out of pockets, and spreading across the country through years of circulation. Another major factor that boosts the value of the 1973 quarter is the presence of errors. Error coins are some of the most sought-after pieces in numismatics because they are essentially factory mistakes, preserved forever in metal. Some examples include off-center strikes, double strikes, die cracks, clipped planchets, and missing elements. These errors were not intentional, they slipped past quality control and escaped into the world. Collectors who find genuine errors sometimes discover their coins are worth far more than they expected, but even without errors, the mint mark itself plays a significant role. A 1973D or 1973P quarter in ordinary circulated condition is usually not rare, but the value increases when the coin is in high grade. On the other hand, the 1973 proof quarter, especially if it is a deep cameo example with frosted design elements and mirror-like fields, can be worth more due to collector demand for premium proof pieces. One fascinating thing about 1970s quarters is that people often overlook them. They assume that because they're not silver, they're not valuable. But seasoned collectors know that rarity does not always come from metal content. Condition rarity, coins that survive in unusually good condition, is just as important. Imagine a coin sitting in a desk drawer for decades, untouched, perfectly preserved. That coin suddenly becomes much more valuable than its well-traveled siblings. And that's where many people are surprised, because they may already have valuable pieces and not even know it. Money value in the collectible world isn't just about how old something is. It's about the right combination of age, demand, condition, rarity, and historical significance. And the 1973 Washington quarter checks a lot of those boxes. Though millions were minted, only a limited number remain in high-grade condition. The video camera zooms in as the narrator continues, giving examples of what makes collectors excited. A beautifully preserved MS-67 example with crisp detail and no noticeable marks can fetch strong prices in auctions. Proof coins graded PR-69 Deep Cameo can also outperform expectations. This shows that even a modern coin from the 1970s has potential to become a treasure for the right collector. But the most important part of understanding coin values is recognizing that not all coins appreciate in value instantly. Some grow slowly over decades. Others take jumps in market value due to collector interest. The 1973 Washington quarter is one of those coins that benefits from renewed attention, especially from collectors who focus on completing full date and mint mark sets. Enthusiasts want a pristine coin from each year, and finding one from 1973 in top condition can be surprisingly challenging. As the video script continues, the narrator describes how to examine your own coins. Begin by looking at the mint mark. Look carefully at the details in Washington's hair. Are the strands sharp or worn down? Check the rim for smoothness and completeness. Turn the coin under a bright light to check for scratches or blemishes. Then flip it to the reverse side and study the eagle's feathers. The more detail you see, the better the grade could be. Once you get into the world of coin collecting, you start to realize that every coin tells a story. Maybe your coin traveled through countless hands. Maybe it sat forgotten in a jar for decades. Maybe it was carefully preserved in a collector's album from the moment it was minted. Each one has a journey, and that journey adds to its character. Collectors don't just buy coins, they buy history, craftsmanship, nostalgia, and the thrill of the hunt. The 1973 Washington quarter represents an era where America was redefining itself, and holding one in your hand is like holding a piece of that story. As the narration reaches its conclusion, the background music swells gently, and the camera settles on a perfectly lit 1973 Washington quarter rotating slowly. The narrator summarizes the journey. These coins are more than pocket change, they are relics of American history that continue to gain appreciation and recognition within the numismatic community.
We're diving deep, really deep, into one such coin. And this isn't just any coin. This is the 1981D Washington quarter, minted in Denver, a coin that appears common on the surface but hides details and possibilities collectors love hunting for. Now, the 1981 Washington quarter may sound like just another piece of change. It's not silver, it's not gold, and you won't feel its weight and think you've discovered treasure. But as with many coins in U.S. history, the intrigue is not always in precious metal content. Sometimes the excitement lies in the way a coin was made, how it has aged, how few examples remain in pristine condition, and how collectors respond to its rarity in top-grade form. So let's begin by stepping back into the early 1980s. This was a time of huge cultural shifts in America. The music world was preparing for MTV to forever change the entertainment landscape. Technology was taking its first steps into the digital age. Ronald Reagan had just become president, and inflation, unemployment, and economic challenges pressed the nation into big decisions. Amid all of this, the U.S. Mint was running full speed, producing millions of circulation coins required to keep the American economic engine moving. In 1981, Washington quarters were struck at 3 mints: Philadelphia, San Francisco, and the Denver Mint, indicated by the small letter D just beneath the neckline of George Washington on the obverse. The Denver Mint struck over 500 million quarters that year. Yes, 500 million. That means finding one is not rare. You may have one right now in a drawer, in a jar, in your coat pocket. That's part of what makes this story so interesting. The treasure value doesn't come from scarcity and circulation numbers but from condition and specific collector-demanded traits. Let's talk about the design first. The obverse features the familiar bust of George Washington, sculpted by John Flanagan and first introduced in 1932. His profile is strong and classical, with his tied-back hair and stoic gaze. The word Liberty arches above him, "In God We Trust" sits just to the left, and the date rests below. It's a design Americans saw for decades, almost to the point of not noticing it anymore. Then there's the reverse. The mighty eagle spreads its wings wide, perched on a bundle of arrows, symbolizing strength and readiness, with olive branches below signifying the pursuit of peace. United States of America curves overhead, and $quarter anchors the bottom. It's a design rooted in tradition, patriotism, and symbolism. But why would any collector care about a quarter like this, especially one made in such high numbers? The answer is condition. Most coins go into circulation almost immediately and suffer wear quickly. They touch countless hands, scrape against keys, drop into machines, and pick up scratches and nicks along the way. Finding a quarter from 1981 that still looks almost flawless, sharp strike, bright luster, no distracting marks, is surprisingly rare. And rarity, combined with demand, is what transforms pocket change into collectible value. What makes the 1981 D quarter especially interesting from a collector's perspective is that it is a pre-state quarter-era coin that became hard to locate in freshly minted condition after the U.S. Mint halted the sale of uncirculated coin sets for a period. Because of this, unattainable pristine examples didn't flood the collector market like they did in other years. The result? Coins from 1981 in top condition are harder to secure. This is also a coin from a time when copper-nickel-clad production quality was not always perfect. Many coins came off the presses with weak strikes, soft details, or blemishes. Even those stored away in rolls and bags collected marks simply from being pressed against other coins. So a truly top-graded 1981 D quarter is not easy to come by. It takes time to find one. It takes even more effort to find one worthy of certification by a grading service such as PCGS or NGC. Collectors often target these coins in high mint state grades, especially MS65 and above. But reaching that level is far more difficult than it sounds. A coin must have strong eye appeal, excellent luster, and minimal contact marks. It must appear almost frozen in time. When such a piece is found, collectors are willing to pay far more than face value. Now, let's explore the mindset of collectors who chase coins like this. For some, it's the thrill of the hunt, checking rolls, searching estate sales, flipping through dealer inventories. For others, it's the enjoyment of assembling complete sets with all dates and mint marks. The Washington Quarter series is long, stretching from 1932 to 1998 in its original design. Collecting it offers a sense of progression and discovery. As collectors narrow in on the high-grade uncirculated range, the 1981 D stands out because it represents the transition period before modern commemoratives and before widespread collector-focused packaging. That exclusivity drives market tension and higher auction values for the best examples. But we're not talking about average circulated coins. A typical worn 1981 D quarter is still worth only face value, 25 cents. It's rare that circulated examples hold premium value because there are simply too many surviving in low grade. So if you find one in your pocket, don't expect a miracle. However, if you come across one with sharp details, mirror-like surfaces, and incredible preservation, now we enter real collectible territory. Imagine holding a coin that looks like it just left the mint even though decades have passed. That's where serious collectors get excited. So, how do you tell if your 1981D quarter is potentially valuable? Look closely. Examine Washington's cheek and jawline. These areas usually show contact marks first. Check the eagle's feathers on the reverse. Are they crisp or blurred? Look for luster, the swirling, cartwheel-like reflection under light. If any of these areas look dull, worn, or scuffed, your coin is likely circulated. However, if everything looks sharp, clean, and vibrant, you may have something worth examining further. And if you believe your coin is exceptional, you can consider professional grading. Once a coin is encased in a tamper-proof slab with a certified grade, it becomes easier to sell and often rises in value because the grading company verifies its condition. The combination of condition scarcity, collector demand, and historical interest is what gives the 1981D Washington quarter its appeal. And when a high-grade example hits an auction, the bidding often reflects that enthusiasm. Before we wrap up, let's reflect on why people are drawn to coins like this. Coins connect us to history. They pass through the economy silently, unnoticed. Yet each coin has a story: where it was made, how it circulated, what hands it touched, and how it survived. Holding one is like holding a small artifact of American daily life. Even a common coin can become rare if it escapes the wear and tear of time. The 1981D Washington quarter represents more than a piece of pocket change. It marks a period of transition, a snapshot of early 80s America, and a testament to the challenge of preservation. Whether you are a beginner collector, an experienced numismatist, or simply someone curious about the hidden world of C, we're diving deep into one particular coin that continues to fascinate collectors, treasure hunters, and everyday people who happen to find it in spare change: the 1983 Denver Mint Washington quarter. In this video script, we'll explore why this coin stands out, the hidden stories behind its production, the collectibles market surrounding it, and the reasons it can be worth far more than its face value. The year 1983 was full of unique circumstances that affected coin production, making certain quarters from that era significantly more desirable. By the end of this script, you'll know exactly why collectors keep a keen eye out for the 1983D quarter, and what makes some examples earn premium prices. And yes, at the very end, we'll mention the special price that collectors have paid for certain high-grade versions, written out in full words, just as requested. The historical background: to understand why the 1983D Washington quarter is special, we need to take a step back into the early 1980s. The United States economy was still recovering from the inflation and recession that had marked the previous decade. The U.S. Mint produced millions of quarters every year to support the expanding demand for coinage in the growing economy. But something unusual happened in 1982 and 1983. During those 2 years, the U.S. Mint did not produce collector mint sets. These mint sets are typically packaged and sold to collectors with pristine examples of each year's coins. Since they were not produced for those years, high-quality, untouched examples of the 1983 quarters, especially those minted in Denver, became extremely scarce. This absence of mint sets meant that nearly all the quarters from that year went directly into circulation. That means they were tossed into pockets, purses, cash registers, and vending machines, accumulating scratches and wear from daily use. As a result, finding a 1983D quarter in perfect or near-perfect condition today is much harder than most other modern quarters. The design and symbolism: the Washington quarter design used in 1983 traces back to 1932, when it was originally created to honor the 200th anniversary of George Washington's birth. The design became iconic, featuring his left-facing portrait on the front and the majestic eagle on the reverse side. The Denver Mint's small D mint mark sits just beside Washington's ponytail, a subtle but essential detail. This mark signifies that the coin was produced at the Denver Mint facility, one of the primary mints responsible for circulating coinage. Collectors often appreciate these classic designs because they represent a long era of American numismatic history. Although the Washington quarter has seen design changes in recent decades, especially with the State Quarters, America the Beautiful Quarters, and American Women Quarter series, the 1983 version remains rooted firmly in tradition. Why the absence of mint sets matters. Mint sets preserve coins in nearly perfect condition. Without them, the only way collectors can obtain mint-state examples is by finding coins that were never heavily circulated. Think about the journey of a typical quarter. It may pass through thousands of hands, endure countless drops, scratches, and abrasions, and lose its luster over time. Now imagine trying to find one from 1983 that managed to avoid all that. Nearly impossible, right? That rarity dramatically increases the value of high-grade 1983 D quarters, especially those graded by professional services as MS65, MS66, or even higher. These coins can command impressive prices because collectors want them, but the supply simply isn't there. The minting challenges of 1983. Another reason the 1983 D quarter is so interesting is that the minting quality during this time was not always consistent. The mint was producing large quantities at high speed, and the pressure to meet demand sometimes resulted in strikes that weren't as sharp or clean as earlier or later years. As a consequence, many 1983 D quarters show signs of weaker details, especially in Washington's hair or the eagle's wings. Finding an example with strong details is even more challenging. Coin grading professionals often emphasize strike quality when evaluating coins, and those with sharper details command higher premiums. The role of coin grading is essential in determining the true value of a collectible coin. A professional grader examines the coin's surface, luster, sharpness of strike, and any marks or imperfections. Even tiny scratches can dramatically lower the value. Here's a rough idea of how grading impacts the worth of a 1983 D quarter. A heavily circulated example, worth its face value. A lightly circulated example, slightly more desirable but still not significant. A mint-state example, much more valuable. A high-grade, professionally certified mint-state example, potentially extremely valuable. Collectors are willing to pay very high prices for the top-tier specimens, especially because so few exist. Why? Circulated coins still matter. Even if your 1983 D Washington quarter isn't in pristine condition, it doesn't mean it has no value. Many collectors appreciate circulated coins for their historical significance. Each scratch tells a story of where the coin has been and how it was used. For some people, the charm is not in the perfection but in the coin's journey. Some circulated examples still bring modest premiums, especially if they retain strong details or unusual features such as errors or interesting toning. Speaking of errors, what to look for? Coin errors can elevate value in surprising ways. Some notable errors that collectors seek include off-center strikes, double die errors, clipped planchets, missing mint marks, weak strikes, or die cracks. If you have a 1983 D quarter with any of these unusual characteristics, it could be worth far more than you expect. The collector market today. In today's collector marketplace, the demand for certain modern-era coins continues to rise. Many people who grew up in the 1980s are now enthusiastic collectors, and this nostalgia plays a significant role in increasing interest in coins from that decade. Meanwhile, the limited supply of high-quality 1983 D quarters creates competition among buyers. As more collectors enter the hobby, the value of rare finds may continue to increase. Online marketplaces, auctions, coin shows, and professional grading companies all play a role in determining and stabilizing prices. When a high-grade example sells for a premium at auction, it often sets a benchmark that other collectors follow. The fascination of everyday treasure hunting. What makes searching for a rare coin so thrilling is that anyone, absolutely anyone, might stumble upon one. You don't need to be wealthy or experienced. All it takes is curiosity, patience, and a willingness to look closely at your change. People have found incredible treasures in the most unexpected places, in old jars of coins kept by grandparents, in bank rolls obtained out of curiosity, or even mixed in with pocket change received at a store. Stories like these inspire countless people to begin coin collecting as a hobby. And once you start, it's easy to fall in love with the history, artistry, and excitement of the hunt. Why this coin matters beyond money. The 1983 D Washington quarter represents more than just potential profit. It symbolizes a specific moment in American minting history, a time when economic pressures and policy decisions inadvertently created a modern rarity. It's a reminder that even ordinary objects can have extraordinary stories. And it shows how something as small as a quarter can serve as a time capsule, reflecting the culture, economy, and craftsmanship of the era in which it was made. Collectors cherish this coin not only because it can be valuable but because it connects them to something bigger, the legacy of American numismatics. Final thoughts and special price mention as we wrap up this exploration of the 1983 D Mint Mark Washington quarter. One thing becomes clear: not all coins are created equal. Some rise above the rest because of scarcity, condition, historical quirks, and collector demand. The 1983 D quarter is one of those special pieces. Today, we're diving deep into the story of a coin that might look ordinary in your hand, but carries a surprising history and a quietly growing collector value. Yes, we are traveling back to the late 1980s, an era of new American energy, cultural change, and one quietly minted coin that has captured the attention of collectors across the country. This is the story of the 1988 P-Mint Washington quarter. The music shifts as the camera transitions to a wide shot of 1980s city life, cars passing by, neon lights flashing, and crowds moving across busy sidewalks. The year was 1988. The United States was closing out a decade of economic shifts, technological development, and cultural transformation. It was a year of presidential campaigning, NASA advancements, the rise of personal computing, blockbuster films, and changing fashions. But while the world was buzzing with new ideas and energy, something was happening quietly inside the Philadelphia Mint, a place where history is pressed into metal day after day. As the camera enters the mint through a dramatic glide shot, the rhythmic clanging of minting machinery begins to echo. Inside those walls, millions of Washington quarters were being produced. The design, originally introduced in 1932 for George Washington's 200th birthday, had become a key piece of everyday American currency. For decades, it had been a symbol of national pride and a familiar part of life, lining pockets, cash registers, and vending machines everywhere. But what makes the 1988 P-Mint Washington quarter special? Why do collectors care about something that was once so common you could find it in spare change? Why has this specific year, 1988, and that small letter P beneath Washington's neck become something worth paying attention to? We glide to an extreme close-up of the quarter, revealing the P-Mint mark just above the date. Let's break it down. When a coin collector looks at a quarter, they are not just seeing money, they are seeing artwork, history, craftsmanship, and potential rarity. Even modern coins sometimes carry hidden value based on condition, errors, low mintage statistics, or unusual production quirks. The 1988 P Washington quarter falls into an interesting category. Not an ancient coin. Not a silver coin. Not a rare key date. But still, under the right conditions, surprisingly desirable, and that's what makes it exciting. The music becomes curious, almost investigative, as the camera shows rows of quarters being produced. First, the basics. In 1988, the Philadelphia Mint struck over 562 million Washington quarters. That's a lot, or so it seems. But survival in high-grade condition is another story. Coins minted for everyday circulation are handled roughly. They travel through coin counters, vending machines, cash bags, parking meters, and endless human hands. They rub against each other, lose their details, and develop scratches, dings, and wear. The camera cuts to battered, circulated quarters rolling across a table. So while hundreds of millions were minted, only a tiny fraction remain in pristine condition. And in the world of numismatics, condition is everything. A coin that has survived decades with sharp details, clean fields, and perfect luster becomes something special, something collectors chase. Now we transition to a dramatic magnified comparison. One circulated quarter next to one brilliant uncirculated example, shining under a spotlight. The difference between a worn 1988 P quarter and a high-grade one is like the difference between an old newspaper clipping and a museum-quality painting. One has served its purpose. The other has preserved its brilliance. Another slow zoom on Washington's portrait. On the obverse side, we see George Washington, facing left, with the word Liberty above his head. The date 1988 sits below his profile, and to the right, the all-important P Mint mark indicates that this coin was produced in Philadelphia. The camera flips to the reverse dot. On the reverse, the majestic eagle stands with wings spread, clutching a bundle of arrows, symbolizing strength and readiness. Beneath it rests an olive branch, representing peace. This design had been in use for decades, and would not be replaced until the State Quarters program launched in 1999. That means the 1988 quarter belongs to the final stretch of the classic Washington Eagle era. We cut to a visual timeline of Washington quarter designs through the years. Collectors love final era coins because they mark the end of an iconic period. They represent a design that served the nation for generations and then quietly transitioned into history. But condition is only one reason the 1988 P Washington quarter has become interesting. There's more. The music shifts to a slightly mysterious tone. Some 1988 quarters, though not all, have subtle strike differences, minting variations, or unusual die conditions. These variations can add even more value. Collectors constantly search rolls of quarters hoping to uncover an exceptionally sharp strike or a rare mint error. Coins like double die obverse, off-center strikes, or weakly struck reverse details can turn an ordinary coin into something much more desirable. The camera shows a montage of error coins under magnification. So what does all this mean for value? Let's talk grading. We cut to a grading scale graphic. Coins are carefully graded using a standardized system that ranges from heavily circulated to perfect condition. The highest grades, mint state 65, 66, or 67, are extremely difficult to achieve for a modern, non-silver circulation coin. That's why collectors are willing to pay strong prices for coins that appear flawless or nearly flawless. The camera pans across a row of graded slabs in a professional display case. Narrator. So while the average 1988 P quarter might only be worth face value, the exceptional examples, those preserved with razor-sharp details, glowing luster, and no distracting marks, can be worth significantly more. And that's the magic of this coin. It teaches us that even modern change can hold hidden treasures. We transition to slow-motion images of coin collectors at shows examining quarters under bright lamps. Narrator. Collectors love the thrill of the hunt. The idea that a simple quarter found in a drawer, an old jar, or a roll from the bank could potentially be valuable adds a spark of excitement to the hobby. Searching for high-grade coins is like treasure hunting. Most of the time, you find common pieces, but every now and then, you strike gold, or in this case, a rare high-grade quarter. The music softens, and the camera returns to the single quarter on the velvet black background. Narrator. So now comes the big question. What is a high-quality 1988 P Mint Mark Washington quarter actually worth? Prices vary depending on condition, rarity of the specific strike, and collector demand. But in certain high grades, especially those certified by professional grading services, the 1988 P quarter has reached values that surprise many new collectors. While circulated examples remain common and worth face value, a perfectly preserved, high-grade coin can command significantly more from dedicated collectors.